The air in the plush law office was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and unearned triumph. My former daughter-in-law, Cassandra, delivered the final blow with the precision of a surgeon. And to my beloved son, Robert, and his wife, Cassandra, the lawyer read, his voice a dry monotone against the tension, I leave the 7 luxury condominiums in Naples, Florida, along with my commercial real estate portfolio in Atlanta. A wave of applause and congratulatory murmurs swept the room. Cassandra's hands, adorned with nails that cost more than my weekly grocery bill, clutched the deed papers like trophies. She turned to me, her smile a razor blade dipped in honey. "Amelia, oh, what a shame," she sighed, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "You only received the old textile mill in Cedar Creek, but I'm sure it holds sentimental value." The condescension was a physical blow. I sat in the leather chair, my worn hands folded in my lap, watching the spectacle. At 68, I had learned to measure my reactions. The cousins, the aunts, the business associates, all clapping for the golden couple, Robert and Cassandra. My son, Robert, 40 years old, wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the polished mahogany table, a statue of shame and silence. "Robert," I said, my quiet voice cutting through the noise, "you're awfully quiet." He flinched, finally looking at me. I saw it then, not grief for his father, but embarrassment for his mother, who had been publicly handed what they all saw as a scrap. "Mom, he began, but Cassandra cut him off. "Robert is just overwhelmed, Amelia," she said, sliding back into her seat with the grace of a panther. 7 properties is a tremendous responsibility. We're thinking of buying a small plane to manage them all. Laughter echoed around us. I reached into my simple leather bag and pulled out my own document, the deed to a 50,000 square foot derelict mill on 30 acres in Cedar Creek, Georgia, the town I'd grown up in. The place where my late husband Charles and I had spent so much time, a place he'd been oddly insistent on buying years ago. "A mill?" a distant cousin said with a poorly concealed sneer. "Well, at least you'll have plenty of storage space, Amelia." I stood, the room falling silent. "Mr. Henderson," I addressed the lawyer, "is that all?" "That is all, Mrs. Evans. The mill, the land, and all associated mineral and water rights are yours free and clear." Mineral and water rights. The phrase floated in the air, unnoticed by everyone, including Cassandra, who was too busy mentally decorating her Florida balconies. "Congratulations to you all," I said, my gaze sweeping the room. I paused at the door, my hand on the brass handle. Robert was looking at me now, his expression a confused mix of guilt and concern. "Son," I said, the words hanging in the sudden quiet, "you really have no idea, do you?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Cassandra's smile tightened. "No idea about what, Amelia?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, and felt a pang of sorrow for the lesson he was about to learn the hard way. "Nothing, sweetheart, nothing at all." I walked out, leaving behind the sound of Cassandra's rising, panicked questions. Let them have their condos and their commercial buildings. Let them plan their aerial commutes and their property management empires. Charles had always been the smartest man in any room. And in my purse, next to the deed, was the sealed letter he'd left for me, to be opened only after the will was read. The letter that would explain everything. Amelia walks away from the public humiliation with a mysterious sealed letter and a seemingly worthless property. But as she gets into her old, reliable car, she can't help but wonder, what secret did her brilliant husband bury in the Georgia hills that he valued more than his entire fortune? The drive home to my modest Atlanta apartment was a blur. The memory of Cassandra's triumphant smirk and Robert's silent shame played on a loop in my mind. My home was my sanctuary, not luxurious, but solid, reliable, and paid for with my own earnings as a structural engineer. It was a testament to substance over style, a concept my daughter-in-law had never grasped. Inside, the silence was a comfort. I made a cup of tea, my hand steady, and sat in my reading chair. The sealed envelope felt heavy in my hands, Charles's familiar script spelling out my name. Amelia. To be opened after the reading. My dearest Amelia, it began, and I could almost hear his voice, warm and slightly amused. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've just endured what I suspect was a rather theatrical performance from our family. Cassandra has been practicing her victory speech for months, completely unaware that she's celebrating winning a game she doesn't understand. I had to smile. Even from beyond the grave, Charles could read people with unnerving accuracy. This was not done out of pettiness, my love. This is education. A brutal, expensive education that our son desperately needs. The Naples condos are beautiful, but they are anchors. I bought them with heavy financing. The combined monthly carrying costs are more than double Robert's annual income. My engineering mind immediately began calculating mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance. The numbers were staggering. Charles hadn't given them assets, he'd given them a financial millstone. The mill, on the other hand, you remember why I bought it. You thought I was being sentimental about your hometown. But you were the one who first noticed the geological surveys, the unique shale formations, the way the river cut through the property. You mentioned it was a perfect site for geothermal energy, remember? I did remember. It had been a passing comment on a weekend trip decades ago, but Charles had listened. The mill sits on one of the most consistent geothermal vents in the region. I've spent the last 2 years securing permits and negotiating contracts with a major energy conglomerate. The licensing fees alone will generate over $3 million annually with built-in escalators. It's a renewable, sustainable fortune, Amelia. Yours. I set the letter down, my heart hammering against my ribs. Geothermal energy. Charles had turned my casual observation into a gold mine. The letter concluded with a final instruction. There is a safety deposit box at the First Bank of Cedar Creek. The key is enclosed. Inside, you'll find all the contracts, the geological surveys, and a bottle of the scotch we shared on our 20th anniversary. Open it when Robert comes home. My phone rang, shattering the silence. Robert's name flashed on the screen. "Mom," he said, his voice strained, "are you okay after today?" "I'm fine, Robert. How are you handling your inheritance?" "It's overwhelming. Cassandra's already hired an architect to redesign the penthouse in the tallest condo. She's talking about marble everything." He paused. "Mom, did Dad ever say anything about the costs? The property taxes on just one of these places are significant." "Did you ask the lawyer about existing mortgages?" "Cassandra handled all that. She said not to worry, that Dad would never leave us with debt." Oh, my sweet, naive boy, I thought, looking at Charles's letter. Your father loved you enough to let you fail.
3 weeks passed. My social media feeds were a relentless parade of Cassandra's new life. Photos of infinity pools, designer shopping sprees in Miami, and boasts about curating a luxury lifestyle. Meanwhile, the key to the safety deposit box in Cedar Creek sat in my jewelry box, a silent promise. The call I'd been expecting and dreading finally came late one evening. "Mom," Robert's voice was tight, laced with a panic I'd never heard before. "I need you to be straight with me. What did you know about Dad's finances?" "What's happened, Robert?" "The bills," he choked out. "The quarterly property tax assessments just came for all 7 condos. It's over $200,000, and that's just the taxes. The mortgages, Mom, there are mortgages on 6 of them. The combined monthly payment is more than I've ever made in a year. I closed my eyes, Charles's mathematical precision unfolding exactly as he'd planned. Have you spoken to Cassandra about selling some of the properties? She won't hear of it, he cried, his frustration boiling over. She says selling is admitting defeat. She's planning a massive 4th of July gala at the main penthouse. She ordered a crystal ice sculpture that costs $10,000. $10,000 for frozen water that will melt in 4 hours. I thought of the geothermal contracts, the guaranteed millions sitting in a bank vault just a few hours' drive away. But revealing them now would rob Robert of the crucial, painful lesson his father had engineered. Robert, you need to have a serious conversation with Cassandra. You need to sell assets to create a sustainable situation. She doesn't live in a world of sustainable, Mom. She lives in a world of more. The desperation in his voice was a physical ache. He was drowning, and Cassandra was cheerfully pouring more water into the pool. The confrontation happened at my doorstep. Cassandra arrived, her face a mask of fury beneath a flawless layer of makeup. Amelia, this has to stop, she demanded, storming into my living room. Robert is talking about selling 5 of the condos. You're filling his head with fear. I'm showing him reality, Cassandra, the reality of debt. Debt is a tool for rich people, she shot back, her eyes wild. You've never understood that. With your practical shoes and your paid-off car, you don't know the first thing about building a legacy. I'd had enough. I retrieved the folder from my desk. Let me show you what a real legacy looks like, Cassandra. I spread the geothermal energy contracts on the coffee table. She stared at the numbers, her face slowly draining of color as she comprehended the annual royalty figures that dwarfed the potential income from her highly leveraged condos. This is for the mill? She whispered, her voice trembling. Charles knew exactly what he was doing, I said calmly. He gave you exactly what you wanted, the appearance of wealth. And he gave me what I needed, the reality of it. The look on her face was one of pure, undiluted horror. The game was up, and she had lost. The truth is out. Cassandra now knows the mill is a gold mine, and her empire is built on sand. As she storms out, humiliated and desperate, Amelia is left with a difficult choice. When is the right moment to throw her drowning son the life preserver she's been hiding? The collapse came swiftly. A month later, Robert called me from a budget motel near the Atlanta airport. His voice was hollow, the sound of a broken man. We lost 2 condos to foreclosure last week, he said, the words flat. The bank just took them. We're fire selling the others. Cassandra left, Mom. She filed for divorce. Her lawyer is demanding half of whatever is left and alimony. I listened, my heart breaking for him, even as I recognized this was the rock bottom Charles had known he needed to hit. I'm at a motel, paying cash. It's funny how fast your friends disappear when you can't afford the cover charge at their clubs. I'm coming to get you, Robert. No, he said, his voice firming with a new resolute. No, Mom. This is my mess. I need to clean it up. If I don't learn to stand on my own now, I never will. In that moment, through the pain, I heard the first echo of the man his father believed he could become. Then let me show you how to build something that lasts, I said. Pack your car and drive to Cedar Creek. It's time you learned what your father really left you. The next day, I went to the first bank of Cedar Creek. The safety deposit box contained everything Charles had promised: the contracts, the surveys, and the bottle of scotch. But there was more. A new deed, drafted just before his death, granting Robert 49% ownership of the mill and the geothermal operation. Charles hadn't just planned for me to catch our son. He'd planned for us to build together once Robert was ready. When Robert arrived, he looked years older, but his eyes held a new clarity. The arrogance of inherited privilege had been burned away. "Mom," he said, looking at the sprawling, rusty mill, "what are we doing here?" I led him inside to a makeshift office I'd set up and spread Charles's master plan across the table. I watched as he processed the geological surveys, the energy contracts, the staggering financial projections. "He knew," Robert whispered, awe and grief twisting his features. "He knew I'd lose everything. He knew she'd leave. He planned all of this." "He loved you enough to teach you the difference between wealth and debt," I said softly. "Partners?" Robert looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my son. Not the anxious heir, but a man ready to work. Partners. In this excerpt, father and son are now partners, united by a secret fortune and a shared purpose. But as they begin their new venture, a legal threat emerges from the ashes of Robert's old life. Cassandra isn't done with them yet, and she's discovered the value of the mill she once mocked. The following months were a whirlwind of purposeful activity. The dusty, cavernous mill began to transform. We cleaned, repaired, and installed a proper office. Robert, shedding the last of his privileged skin, worked with the relentless drive I'd never seen in him. He devoured the energy contracts, studied geothermal technology, and managed the incoming royalty payments with the meticulous care of someone who now understood the value of a dollar. The first quarterly payment arrived, $750,000. The number on the statement made Robert freeze. This is real," he'd murmured, the ghost of his financial trauma flickering in his eyes. "And it's not attached to $1 million in debt. Our venture, which we named Evans Renewable Energy, was born." But just as we found our footing, a letter arrived from a law firm in Atlanta. Cassandra's lawyers. They had discovered the geothermal operation, were claiming Robert had concealed marital assets during the divorce proceedings. They demanded a full accounting and a 50% share of the business. For a moment, the old fear returned to Robert's face. Then it hardened into resolve. "No," he said, his voice steady. "This was never ours. It was yours, and now it's ours. She has no claim to it." We armed ourselves with Charles's meticulous paperwork. The dates on the contracts proved they were activated after the divorce. The new deed granting Robert ownership was executed after their separation. Charles's foresight had built a legal fortress around our new beginning. While our lawyers handled Cassandra's claim, Robert's vision for the business expanded. "This isn't just about making money, Mom," he said one evening, looking out over the 30 acres. "This is about this town. Cedar Creek is dying. We can use this energy, this income, to bring it back to life." He sketched out ideas, a technical training center inside the mill to teach renewable energy skills, a business incubator for green tech startups, using our clean energy to power local businesses at a reduced cost. It was a plan for generational impact, not just generational wealth. Charles's brutal education had forged a philanthropist.
As we worked on the blueprints for the training center, a different kind of letter arrived. This one was handwritten, on plain paper, from a minimum security prison in Florida. Cassandra had been convicted of defrauding one of her new investors in a desperate scheme. Her letter was not from a lawyer, but from her. Robert, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I am asking for a chance to earn it. I see now what your father was trying to show you. I was so busy chasing the reflection of wealth, I never learned how to create it. If your offer to help people rebuild their lives is real, then I'm asking you to include me. Robert handed me the letter, his expression unreadable. He asked, "What do you think?" I watched my son carefully. The man who had been manipulated and bankrupted by this woman now held her future in his hands. "What do you think, Robert?" I asked, turning the question back on him. He was silent for a long time, staring at the letter. "I think everyone deserves a chance to prove they can change," he said finally. "But not a handout, an opportunity. She can apply to the reentry program we're starting like everyone else. She'll start at the bottom. If she succeeds, it will be because she earned it." Pride swelled in my chest. This was the culmination of Charles's plan. Robert was thinking not with bitterness, but with wisdom and a sense of justice. A year later, I stood with Robert at the grand opening of the Evans Geothermal Institute. The old mill was unrecognizable. Solar panels adorned the roof, and the hum of clean energy powered bright classrooms where students learned to install and maintain geothermal systems. The incubator space was already hosting 3 startups. The town of Cedar Creek was experiencing a renaissance it hadn't seen in decades. Cassandra was there too. She had been accepted into the program. She worked in the administrative office, her once perfect nails now short and unpolished, her designer clothes replaced with a simple uniform. She was quiet, diligent, and kept to herself. She was earning her way back, one humble day at a time. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Robert didn't speak about money or assets. He spoke about responsibility, community, and building something that would outlast us all. He spoke about his father, not as a rich man, but as a wise one. After the crowds dispersed, we stood on the same loading dock where Charles had filmed his explanatory video years before. "He would be so proud of you, Robert," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm finally proud of me, Mom," he replied, his gaze sweeping over the thriving campus. "Not because of what I inherited, but because of what we built after I lost it all." The sun set over the Georgia hills, painting the sky in brilliant hues. Charles's final gift wasn't the money, or the mill, or the energy. It was the man standing beside me, a son who had learned that true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by who you become when you have nothing left to lose but your character. And that was an inheritance beyond price. The journey is complete, but a new one begins. With the Institute thriving and Robert transformed, a letter arrives from a European energy consortium, proposing a partnership that would take their small-town operation global. Will they expand their legacy, or has the final lesson been about knowing what is truly enough?